after getting familiar with the interface of Rhino to the extent, we're gonna work on objects and the way that we use to sketch them, step by step. The first concept or item that I want to explain is the concept of curve. Actually, simply by saying a curve, what is pop up to your mind? What is come to your mind? Normally, when we hear curve, we imagine an arc-shaped line which is not straight, or a line which is inclined. But in Rhino, everything is different. All of the 2D drawings, lines, rectangles, curves, all of these items are called curve in Rhino. You may find it strange, but let's check it out, since everything is different in Rhino. For example, I sketch a line, a chain of lines. If I select it, we got an open curve, as you can see. This is the type of this object. But if I sketch a circle, then we will have a closed curve. Or even if I sketch a curve or an arc, again we will have an open curve as you're concerned. So all of these are called curve, even a rectangle which is a closed curve. Well done. We are finished with the introduction of this session. In the continuation, we're going to getting familiar with the different types of geometries in Rhino. I have prepared a file for you, an image, and then I will explain the different kinds of geometry according to that, or about the different categories of the objects in Rhino. So wait for a second, please. Well done. As you can see on this screen, the objects in Rhino are divided into 4 categories. Points, or in fact one-dimensional object, that if I select it, type is point. Since we got 4 points and the first type is point. The next type is curve, as you can see, that we divide the curves into 2 types, open and closed, as I exemplified in the introduction. If I select this, as you can see, we got an open curve. In the another one, if I select it, you will see that we got a closed curve. Well done. The next group or category is surfaces. As you can see, in surfaces, we are dealing with 3D geometry models or model geometries, 1-dimensional, 2-dimensional, and 3-dimensional in the type of surface. Here we got a surface, and if I select it, the type is surface, as you can see. Let's check each of them. Surface, the type in properties. Well done. And the last group, we got the polysurfaces, which are composed by multiple surfaces which are associated to each other, creating polysurfaces. However, we can divide them into 2 parts, open and closed polysurfaces, and then open polysurface, and then here we got the closed solid polysurface, as you can see on the screen. Again, closed solid polysurface. Well done. These were the main 4 types of the objects in Rhino, which are the points, open and closed curves, surfaces, and polysurfaces, open and closed. That the polysurfaces are composed by multiple surfaces. But how do we can activate the commands in Rhino, or just enable them? For example, if I want to sketch a line, what approaches do I have which provide me with the line, or how many approaches I have to activate the command of line? Here, let me show an image for starting a command. As you can see on the screen, for starting a command, we got 4 approaches, as you can see, according to the photo. Let me arrange these windows in order to have a better view for teaching you these concepts, and then we will go through the lessons. Anyway, the first item is menu. We can get access to the command via menu. So let's check it out. I'm gonna sketch a line. Where should I find the curve, or which one I should open? According to the last session lessons, excellent, I should open curve. Since a line is a kind of a curve, I open curve, and then in line, then we got single line segments, normal to surface, that I will talk about them later. This time I sketch a single line to tell you the first approach for getting access to a single line for starting a command, which was menu from curve. For example, for sketching a circle, curve, circle, and then for instance center radius circle, by this way. And the next approach is button. We can get access to the command by the icon or by the main toolbar. Here in the sidebar, we can sketch a chain of lines and then the circles by specifying a point. And the third one, which is frequently used, is the command line. Just like in AutoCAD, we can type our command in command line, the full name or the abbreviated name. For example, in order to sketch a line, I type L-I-N-E, line enter, and then single line. Or I can type L enter, then it offers me the single line. For example, if I want to sketch a circle, I type C in the command line and then I press enter. So all in all, command line would be a fast and quickly approach for getting access to a command or activating it. And the fourth one is pop-up. But as you are concerned, we cannot include all of the commands in our pop-up. But just in case, if we have included some of the commands in our pop-up, we can get access to our pop-up by pressing down middle mouse button. For instance, for a curved line, we got the specific command that we can activate the command by using the pop-up. However, we can find it in the sidebar too, and then starting the command. So all in all, we got 4 approaches for starting the command. Pop-up is the fastest one. Then I recommend you to use command line. The succeeding ones, button and menu. Well done, these were the approaches for starting a command. But if you want to repeat your previous command which was started before, how we can repeat our previous command which was started before? For repeating, we got 2 approaches. As you can see at the image, the first approach for repeating the command, same as AutoCAD. For example, if I have started sketching a line, then I can use right click, spacebar enter, repeat the command again. In order to sketch the straight line. Note that right-click, spacebar, and enter are similar to each other in Rhino. So while I was teaching you, if once I told you right-click, or spacebar, or enter, you should know that all of these 3 are the same. They act like each other. Or in other words, they really are the same. So firstly, you can use right-click, or spacebar, or pressing enter. For example, I press enter. As you can see, the command is repeated. Or spacebar. Well done. But one of the points or items which is very important in Rhino is repeating the 10 or 20 last commands by using right click in the command line. Let me show you. Here in Rhino, if I right click on the command line, according to the settings, you can check the last 20 commands that you have used in your projects in the Rhino. For example, here I have used a cone, sketching a cone. I'm sorry. As you can see by right click in the command line, for example a box. All in all, we can get access to our last 20 commands that we have been using in the scene by a right click in the command line. Since all of them have been saved, we can use this approach if we want to repeat them. But how do we can set a limit for the number of the commands which were recently used? Here in options, in a standard, you can either click on option or type it in command line, OP, enter, and then in Rhino options. Then I open general. Wait for a second, please. Right here I open general, then in most recently used commands pop-up menu, we can set the limit value. As you can see, the most recently used commands pop-up menu limit list to that we will have the 20 most recently used commands by a right click in the command line actually. Well, let us begin our drawings by sketching lines, which are at the second type of objects, curves. Since up to this point we have get familiar with the interface of Rhino and the work environment, and we're gonna work on drawing tools and commands. But before doing anything in all of the software, we should adjust the project unit. So let's see how we can adjust or set the project unit. Here in tools, options actually. However, I can get access to the options from standard tab in the toolbar. It does not make difference. I open Rhino options, and then in the options I open, let me check the top part, the top items, units and tolerances. And here we can specify the model units, for example per meters or per millimeters, inches, miles. you may want to choose centimeters. So at the first step, we have to specify the project units and the tolerances. And as you can see on the screen, we got a wide range of choices in model units in a way that we got even light years. I mean, it covers all of the units, all of the existing units. And the next one, which is significant as well, is absolute tolerance. I have specified 0.01. So here, as you can see, the lower fractional parts of the value are considered by the tolerance, like 1 meter and 23 centimeters. However, we can maximize the tolerance, the value of tolerance, by adding another 0.001, and this is better and the recommended absolute tolerance. And then for the angle tolerance, for example, if you are working with the less than 1 degrees, you can specify 0.5 as the angle tolerance per degrees. However, we usually specify 1 degrees for the angle tolerance, and it is enough. Well done, this was the first step. And then the distance display decimal that we use in our projects. Okay, so we have set the unit, perimeter, and also the absolute tolerances. So the grid line or the units are per 1 meter. But the another important thing or technique is setting the Rhino shortcuts. In fact, Rhino is a CAD-based software, so it has many similarities with AutoCAD. In Rhino, we are provided with a capability that we can transfer all of the shortcuts in AutoCAD, from AutoCAD to Rhino. If you have been using typing TR for trimming, we can type TR in command line for getting access to the trim command. We can add the CAD shortcuts to Rhino. But how we can do this? First of all, we need another file, which is AutoCAD aliases for Rhino. If I open the notepad, all of the shortcuts of AutoCAD are defined to be exported to Rhino. So you need this file, AutoCAD aliases for Rhino, that you will be given this file. Then you should add this file to your Rhino. But how? From option, then in aliases. Here, if I click on restore defaults, then the customized aliases will be removed. So the default aliases are limited. Meanwhile, they are not matched with AutoCAD. They are not similar to each other. For example, what is the command of O in AutoCAD? Yes, of course, offset, while here we got ortho. So if we want to export the shortcuts commands to Rhino, we got the file, as you know. We should import the file. Then I browse for the file. Just wait for a second, please. And then I open the aliases. Here it says that the aliases C already exists. Do you want to replace it? As you know, it is possible that we may have some similar aliases. For example, the command of the C is cell crossing, while we need C for giving us the command of circle. So I click on yes all to replace all of the commands or aliases. 120 aliases found, 120 imported. Well done, we got all of them imported to Rhino from AutoCAD. Okay, so if I type L in command line, we will be provided with line, or C circle, O offset. Well done. So by this way we will have some backgrounds about Rhino. So it enhances your self-confidence, since you already master in parts of commands in Rhino. The first drawing command that we're gonna cover is line. Polyline. I click on it to start the command. Just like in AutoCAD, for starting a line or starting a command or sketch a line, we should specify the starting point by just a click. Then, if we want to have a straight line, we have to specify the second point. And just like in AutoCAD, we have to enable the ortho. But for those who do not know AutoCAD, If you activate ortho, it restricts the movement of the cursor to multiples of a specified angle from the last point created. Actually, at 4 directions, left and right, up and down. And you can start the command by using F8. You can either click on the icon of ortho, or you can press down F8 to specify the angle at which the movement of the cursor is restricted when ortho mode is active. In a sketch a line, at first we specify the length like 30 meters, then we press enter and then we specify the direction by just a click. The length is already specified, I specify the direction, then I click. Again, let me specify the length, 25 meters, enter, and then the direction, and I click or press left mouse button. As you are concerned, when you are specifying the length, we are not able to specify the direction. While when we specify the direction in AutoCAD, meanwhile entering the length, the line will be sketched. But here is different. We sketch the line in 2 stages, specifying the length and then the direction. So this was the difference between AutoCAD and Rhino in sketching lines. Suppose that I'm gonna sketch a 50 meters line to left direction, but the mouse is toward the right direction. It doesn't matter. 50, enter, and then the direction, and then I click. As you can see, the line is sketched. Again 30, enter, and then the direction, click. By this way, and when I wanted to stop sketching the line, I press left mouse button to cancel the command. All in all, in the process of sketching a line, we got 2 sketch stages actually. First of all, specifying the length and then specifying the direction, and then we can press left mouse button while we sketch a line in AutoCAD only in 1 stage. I mean, we specify the length and the direction simultaneously. When we are sketching a line, if ortho was inactive, we can activate ortho by holding down shift. Actually, this technique is commonly used when we don't want to specify the length, since as I hold down shift, I'm not able to specify the length of the line. But I can sketch lines freely like this way. Now I release shift, I hold it down, again release, I hold it down, check this out, this is the result. Or even you can at first specify the length, for example 4D, and then we can specify the direction, but the ortho is inactive. But I can hold down shift to activate the ortho. But this is not commonly used, but if you wanted to hold down shift at first, you should specify the length and then you should specify the direction of your line. Very well, but how do we can sketch inclined lines or an angled line, and ortho should be inactive? However, if it was active, it didn't work out, but you'd better to deactivate it. Anyway, in the process of sketching the angled lines, we got 3 stages. At the first stage, we should specify the angle. For example, I want an angled line in 30 degrees. I want to track your attention to the command line. Watch this please. At first, I type the less symbol, and then I specify the degree or angle, 30 degrees for example. But note that when we specify the angle or the degree, for example 30, that 30 degrees angle is not given to us. Right now, the specified angle at which the movement of the cursor is restricted is 30. As you can see, when we rotate it, we got many parts that each of them are 30 degrees. So at first we specify the degree or angle. Then at the second stage, we should specify the length of the line. For example 4D, enter, and you could probably guess the next stage. Great. Here we should specify the direction or one of the 30 degrees parts or angles. Like this. I click and then we can have our angled line. Let's try again. I hold down shift. I sketch in a straight line. For example, I may want to rotate it in 60 degrees. So at first, the less than symbol, 60, enter. Check this out. This is the 60 degrees angle, which is restricted. And then we should specify the length, like 25 meters, enter, then the direction, like this one. However, we can substitute these stages 1 and 2 with each other. We can specify the length at first and then specify the angle. Let me give you an example, like having a 50 meters line and 20 degrees for the specified angle. 50 enter. As you can see, I can rotate it so I can specify the direction, the angle. Then the less than symbol, 20. Watch this. And then always at the last stage we should specify the direction. And then we will have the line by just a click. I click on it. I click again to cancel the command. Similar to AutoCAD, in Rhino we can use @sign and relative coordinates. For instance, here I can pick the line, then I sketch it. And suppose that we wanted to move it along the X and Y axis. So what should we do? At first, in the command line, we type @sign, then we hold down shift. You can hold down shift and then press 2 for @sign. Then we extend the line along the x-axis, for example 10 units. Then I add a comma and a value along the y-axis, like 15. Check this out. 10, 15 along the x and y-axis. Enter. Let us try again. For example, I want to move it or extend it 20 units or meters along the x-axis. By this way, 20 and then comma, then -5 for along the y-axis. Enter. So at first we specify the first point, and then by specifying the position of the point, the second point according to the x and y axis, these 2 points will be connected to each other, and then we will have the line. So by this way we can sketch our straight lines and also angled lines. But let's talk about the snaps, object snaps. As I explained before, we place them here usually, but let us talk about them. Those who are master in AutoCAD are already familiar with these. I pick line and then I can specify the end parts. A snap gives us some specific points from the line. They constrain the marker to an exact location on an object, like the end of the lines or the intersections, centers. For example, we're gonna start sketching a line from the end line. So I click on the end, then I start sketching. But note that, just like in AutoCAD, we do not have the icon snaps, or the snap icons actually. For example, on a square for the end, we only have the text. For example, the midpoint object snap, which gives us the midpoint of the line. As you can see, the midpoint is specified, but the icon is not displayed. And then we can start sketching. But let me give you a brief explanation about the object snaps. Endpoint. And then near to object snap, as we get close to the lines, it would be connected to the line and start the new line from the nearest line. While if I uncheck or deactivate near, as you can see, the marker is not constrained. We should specify the exact location of an object ourselves. But if I zoom in, as you can see, these 2 lines are not connected to each other. But if I activate near, it sketches the line exactly on the specified line. And about points, it constrains the marker on the points. As you can see, check this out. And midpoint object snap, I explained it. Center is used for the circles and the curves, that it gives us the center of them. INT or intersection object snap, it gives us the intersections. If I sketch a line like this, then we can have the intersection between these 2 lines. As you can see, here we got the midpoint, and I activate intersection like this, and then it constrains the marker, so we can start a line from there and sketch the line from the intersection. The next one is perpendicular object snap. Let me give you an example. I sketch a line which is perpendicular to this line. Perpendicular is displayed. Then I sketch the line perpendicular on the another one. The next one is tangent, quadrant, knot, and others that I will explain them later, since right now they are not required to be known. But if you wanted one of these object snaps to be activated for a while, like midpoint, here if I right click on mid, as you can see, it deactivates others, but midpoint. Right now the only active object snap is midpoint. We can reset it to the default mode by a right click. This is very practical. I want to repeat it. Suppose that I need only one of these snap objects or object snaps to be active for a while or temporarily, like endpoint. So I right click on endpoint. It maintains the endpoint while others are deactivated. But if I want to reset this, I again right click on the endpoint, which returns the changes, or it reset it to the previous mode by just right clicking on one of them, like endpoint. However, here we got grid snap as well. As you can see, I explained the grid lines last sessions, which is an array of lines lying on a portion of the construction plane in the viewport. Here, if I activate the grid snap, as you can see, grid snap constrains the marker to the crossing points of the grid, which is used for modular designing. And as the unit is specified to 1 meter, check this out, it constrains the marker to the crossing points of the grid. Then we can have modular designing. What about the points? As I told you before, we got an infinite array of line here, or array of lines, which are endless. However, a defined value, only a defined region of it is visible in the viewport. We got the grid lines everywhere of the viewport, but graphically it is not visible in the viewport. However, we can extend the region, the visible region of the grid lines, but it is not necessary. So even when the grid lines are not visible in the viewport, when the grid lines are not visible in the viewport, we should know that it covers the whole viewport and the plane is infinite, and we can deactivate it if we don't want to constrain the marker to the crossing points. The next one is SmartTrack. SmartTrack is a system of temporary reference lines and points that is drawn in the Rhino viewport using implicit relationships among various 3D points. And we get this similar option in AutoCAD as well, like for example, by using SmartTrack, then I can extend the line from the end line. Then I want to sketch a perpendicular line. I hold the line there for a second. Then if I drag it, which is perpendicular on it, as you can see, we got 2 parallel lines, and then I can extend it to connect it to the another point. Undo, and I deactivate the SmartTrack. Again, I start sketching by using line. I hold down Shift, or I press F8 to activate ortho. This time SmartTrack is not activated. So how can I sketch a perpendicular line? As you can see, if I turn it on, then I sketch the line perpendicular to the another line, and then complete the curve. Well done. However, we can use SmartTrack more professionally. For example, here in the end line, if I hold the marker. But note that for using SmartTrack, it is not necessary to just click, since you just need to hold the marker and then start sketching. It just gives you the perpendicular line. Or for example, here as you can see, some specific angles are given, like the 90 degrees or perpendicular. For example, perpendicular on this line. Or I can extend the line and sketch a line which is perpendicular to this one, as you can see on the scene. It offers us so many capabilities in sketching curves, which is a system of temporary reference lines and points that is drawn in the Rhino viewport using implicit relationships among various points and other geometries in space. You can activate it when it was needed, and don't forget to disable it after getting your work done. And let me give you an interesting point about this. Actually, it is almost similar to this. When you are sketching a line, for example from the endpoint until this point, for example, you want to consider a gap or an offset between these 2 lines. Here if I hold the marker on the endpoint without clicking on it, since if you click, the line will be sketched. I hold and I press tab, then I restrict the direction. So then you can only control the length. Then you can specify the length of your line, since the direction is restricted, like 20 meters, and then enter. Another example, like I wanna sketch a line between these 2 points, so I pick the polycurve, I specify the first point, but I do not click, I just hold the marker. Then I press tab. As you can see, the direction is restricted, and then I can specify the length, for example 40, and then press enter to finish it. But if you press tab twice, it constrains the length Let me give you an example. Here I press tab just for once, the direction is restricted. I press tab once again. As you can see, the length is constrained too, and then we can sketch the circle. Another example, for example, I want to sketch a line at this size or at this length, but at a different direction. I sketch it, but I do not click. I hold the marker, and then if I press tab to restrict the direction and length, after that I can specify the direction by this way. And I release shift to sketch the line. So by this way we can measure a distance and then associate it to the line. Let me give you another example. For example, the gap between these two. I'm gonna sketch a line perpendicular to this line at this size or equal to the distance. So by using endpoint snap, I start the line by this way, but I do not click. Then here if I press tab just for once, the direction is restricted. But if I press tab once again, as you can see, the length is restricted too, and I can rotate the line. And if I enable SmartTrack, I can sketch a line perpendicular to that line, like this way. And as you're concerned, we can use this way, this approach, this tool for sketching the doors, since the sizes are adjusted and we don't have to trim the line. Let me clean up the scene, and then I'm gonna tell you some points. Actually, in Rhino, we can have our clicks. We can have multiple clicks in each of the views. For instance, if I want to sketch a line, I pick polyline by this way. Then from the endpoint, I start sketching. At the middle of this process, I can change the view. For example, I switch to front, and then I continue sketching, enter, look, back to perspective. So there is no limitation in switching views. I started sketching from top, and then I finished it in the front view. As you can see in the scene, let me give you another example in multiple lines, since you may use this technique for some of the commands. For example, you may have to click 3 times, once in top, secondly in front, and the third one at the top view. So let's try. I pick polyline, and then from the endpoint I start, then in front view I specify the second point, then again I back to top like this, then back to front by this way, again back to perspective, I specify the point, then I enclose the curve. Check this out. We have sketched a closed curve in the scene. Don't forget to practice on these, since these are very important. Again, polyline. In top view I click, front view, then I specify some points like this way, back to top view, then by using SmartTrack, perpendicular, and then I enclose the curve. Let's check it out in perspective. By this way, this is the result. This can be very helpful during the process of the project. And the next point is about the application of control button in sketching lines. Here if I pick polyline and then I start sketching by this way, specifying points, as you can see they are sketched on the plane. But here if I hold down control button, I haven't clicked yet, but I hold down control, the control is held down. Here if I click, then we can release control after clicking. Then if I move the marker of the mouse, as you can see, the point is perpendicular to the plane, to the specified plane that you have sketched the lines. Look in the perspective view. Let me try again. I hold down control button, but I do not click. I'm pressing control button. Then after clicking, I can release control button. Then if I move the marker of the mouse, the point will be sketched perpendicular to the plane, and the movement is perpendicular to the plane. Even we can specify a length for it. Again I hold down control, then I click and type 60 meters, enter. Then we can have the curved lines in the scene, as you can see in perspective view. However, instead of pressing down control button, we can just switch the view instead of holding down control. As you can see in front view, it gives us the access to sketch the line perpendicular to the plane. However, holding down Control has got its own application that you can click to sketch a line, and then hold down or press down Control button. Then you can move the mouse to specify the position of the point and then click to sketch it, like this way. I got a question for you. Here if I specify a point in the scene, then secondly I'm gonna specify the point overlapping on the previous one. I wanna hold down Control and then I click. What would happen? Or if I move the mouse, what shall happen? Let me tell that again. I have a specified point. Then for specifying the second point, I move the marker overlapping the previous point. I hold down Control and then I click. If I move the mouse, what shall happen? Yes, we will have a perpendicular line to the plane, as you can see, which is very practical. So don't forget to practice this lesson. Let me clean up the scene and then I'm gonna teach you the different types of lines, which are very simple actually. As I mentioned before, when we are working with a specific tool like lines, we can by click and drag, we can dock the window. Since by this way we got access to the lines easily. Anyway, till now we have worked on sketching, but some points are left to say. The first one is single line. It offers us just a single line. But the tool that we were using was polyline, that it allows us to sketch multiple lines sequentially, so we can keep on sketching lines until you press enter or right click, and the sketching command will be finished or cancelled. But if you are using polyline, like this way as you can see on the scene, if you press down escape button, the whole sketching will be cancelled and deleted, and you can't turn them back by undo, since the changes weren't saved yet, and you can't turn them back by undo. Suppose that I'm sketching these curves, I hold down shift button, and then by accident I release shift button, and then I need to edit one of the line. How can I edit this sketch? What do you think? Exactly, we use U. If I type U in command line, as you can see, undo, then you can just type U in the command line and then press enter in order to undo the commands or the sketched lines, and then start sketching to correct the curve. I press enter, well done. And as I told you before, it is similar to AutoCAD. These lines are connected to each other, and if I click on explode or X as shortcut, you can separate these lines to each other from each other. As you can see, each of them are considered as a single line, and if I select all of them, by using join, we can connect the lines to each other or join them and have a polyline, as you can see on the scene. And the next command is line from midpoint. As you can see, I pick it to give you an example. If I pick the line from midpoint and then I specify a point, that would be the midpoint of the line. Then I can extend the line from the two directions, like this way. I disable SmartTrack. But note that while you're sketching it, when you specify, for example, 20 meters for the length, the specified value will be multiplied in 2, because the specified length will be associated to the half of the line. And I have explained specifying the angles, for example, 45 degrees and 50 meters for length. At first the less than symbol, 45 enter, then the length, the angle is specified. I specify 15 enter, very well. Then I specify the direction, and this will be the result. The 15 degrees is related to the half of the line, from the midpoint to the top part, and from to the bottom, or the another end line. I talk about line normal to surface later, but this time we want to talk about line vertical to C-plane. By this way we can sketch perpendicular lines, but it got 2 points. As you can see in the icons, we got 2 axes, the green and the red axis. It shows that the line is vertical. The sketch will be perpendicular to the plane. And the next point is about the concept of C-plane. C-plane is the current plane actually, or the current work plane. As you can see, the previous lines are sketched on the current work plane. For example, in the perspective view, this is the current work plane that the grids are displayed. So if I choose vertical line C plane from C plane, then we will have a vertical line started from the current plane, current work plane, or perpendicular to the work plane. And I don't want to talk about the length since I have talked about it before. For example, 50 enter, then you can specify the direction, then by a click the changes will be saved. But here if I open the front view and then I use the normal to vertical to C plane, how does it sketch the line? Exactly, the line is moving forward, and let me show you the result. Here it is. Let us check it in the 4 views. Here if I want to sketch the line in the front view, as you can see the work plane is in front of us, so the line will be perpendicular to the work plane or to the front view, as you can see in perspective view. Here you may ask what is the differences between holding down control button and using vertical line from C plane, since both of them give us a vertical line which is perpendicular to the work plane. I should say that we can use holding down control in other commands too. I mean, you're obliged to learn both of them, and in the future sessions you will get familiar. All in all, we got 3 approaches for sketching a vertical line that we should learn them. Firstly, how can we have a vertical line? Actually, in the first approach, we can sketch the line simply in the front view in order to have a vertical line. Let's check it out in perspective. Here is the result. Secondly, we can pick line. We can click and then hold down control button. Then by drag we can have a vertical line which is perpendicular to the work plane. And the third approach is using vertical to C plane. Very well. The next item is line from 4 points, as you can see on the screen. Firstly, I specify the first point by a click. Then I click once again. Actually, the first 2 click specifying the direction of the line. Then by specifying the 3rd and the 4th points, we can have our line. Check this out. Let me try again. So watch this part carefully. I pick line from 4 points, and then in the scene perspective view, let me clean up the scene at first, and then we can sketch the line by 4 points. For example, I specify here the first point, then the second point to just specify the direction. Then I can specify the length, for example 40, enter. As you can see, we got a 40 meters distance, and then the second length, for example 60, by this way. However, we can sketch these by holding down tab, but the start point is different to the another one. I mean, the start button is connected to the previous one. But if we want to just have a single line in the scene by 4 points, the first click and then the second one in order to specify the distances and then the length by this way. Very well. And the next one is line bisector. In order to give you an example by using bisector, here in the top view, if we have a line like this, by using bisector we can find the bisector of these 2 lines. I click on bisector. At first we should specify the intersection by this way, the intersection, then a start of angle to bisect, and then end of the angle. I mean, we should specify the 2 sides, then we can have the bisector. Then here we can specify the length, 30 for example. Let me give you another example. And then another lines, in the aligned lines, let me sketch a vertical line here. Then we're gonna find the bisector, and then I'm gonna exemplify this case in the 3D view perspective. Since being skilled at sketching line in the perspective view or in the 3D view is required, since it is different to the 2D drawing. And here if I want to find the bisector of these lines, I choose bisector, then I choose the intersection, then the first side or angle, and then the second one, then it gives us the bisector. Check this out. I keep on going at first intersection, then the first angle or side, then the second one, and then sketching the bisector. However, we can specify the length of the bisector too by importing a value in the command line. And the next one is angled, which it is used when you already got a line, and then you want to sketch the angled line. At first, we should specify the baseline. For example, this line I specified as the baseline. Then I should specify the pivot angle, for example 60 degrees. Check this out. As you can see, this is our angled line in 60 degrees. But right now, let's check the positive and the negative directions in sketching lines. In top view, by this way, consider this line at first for our example. Then I pick the angled line for specifying the baseline in 2 points. Keep this in your mind, while we want to sketch a line that in the positive directions, which are clockwise directions, the positive direction is the anti-clockwise actually, while the negative direction is the clockwise. But here we're gonna deal with the anti-clockwise. If I want to specify the direction from left to right, it would be clockwise, so I should specify minus 30 degrees. Check this out. But if I want to modify the direction, at first I specify the base, then I specify 30 degrees, then it would be anti-clockwise, and then you can specify the length of the line. But don't forget to work on the clockwise then anti-clockwise, because it is practical in specifying the angle and also the direction of the lines. Well done. And the next item is line perpendicular from curve. If I pick this type of line, suppose that if I sketch a circle and then I use this line, if I click, check this out, as you can see the line is perpendicular to the perimeter of the circle, and if I sketch it inside the circle, we can have the diameter of the circle, and about the outside the lines are perpendicular to the circle. And here if I sketch a curved line, look, I can have perpendicular lines to the curved line by this way. But you don't have to work on this, but don't forget to consider the circle and practicing the perpendicular lines. Well done. Let's talk about the different types of selections. Here if I sketch a curve, a closed curve, or an object for example like this, by this way let me complete it. Then I'm gonna expand the example. Wait for a second please. Here I'm gonna tell you 3 techniques for selection, which are totally similar to the AutoCAD. At the first case, for example or approach, we sketch a region by click and drag from left to right, but under which good condition we can select some object by click and drag from left to right. Excellent. The whole object should be covered in the region, or the window that we sketch should include the object. So in the first approach, we sketch a window by click and drag from left to right. But if we want to select them, we should include the entire object into the window, or the whole object should be inside the window. Check this out. Well done. What about the sketching a window or a frame from right to left? You can drag right to left for a crossing selection. If we cover a small part of the object, then we can select it. This type of selection is called crossing selection, that we drag from right to left for a crossing selection. But the third approach is clicking the object. We can select the object by just a single click, and we usually use this approach when we got some objects overlapping on each other and we just want to make sure that we are selecting a single object. But it has a point that you need to know. Let me sketch some objects here, for example some rectangles by this way, which they got overlapping parts as you can see, and I'm sketching these overlappings intentionally. In order to make the instruction more informative, I associate different colors to these objects, modifying the color of the layers, but you don't have to do this, since I have just modified the colors in order to move the instructions forward. But later in the future sessions we will work on it, and you'll learn how to modify the colors. But here, could you tell me how many lines, how many overlapping lines do we have? Exactly 2. Here, if I click, we will have a selection menu, as you can see, in which we got 2 choices, the green curve and the purple curve. Since we have 2 objects here, 2 curves, and as we move the marker, they will be highlighted. Even the type of the object is given to us, which is curve, and the color, for example, purple, and it is highlighted. So by this way, you can easily select your desired line. For example, if I click here, in which we got 4 overlapping lines, we got a selection menu or the list of curves. Then from the displayed list or menu, we can select our desired object or curve. But how do we can add objects or remove objects from our selections? As you are concerned in all of the softwares, we can hold down Control for removing or adding the objects to our selection. But here we use Shift. By holding down Shift, we can add items or just select them. But if I hold down Control, I can deselect the objects. We hold down Shift for selection and we hold down Control for deselection. We have put a tool in our pop-up which is Select Last Created Object, which is very practical. Here if I sketch a rectangle like this, and then if I sketch a circle, then if I click on Select Last Created Objects, which objects will be selected? What do you think? Exactly, the circle will be selected. Check this out. The most recent object which was sketched or created or even modified will be selected. Let me give you another example. However, I haven't taught you this. Suppose that I sketch a circle here, and then I'm gonna use array to array the circle. For example, 15 as the number. By this way, I'm gonna place the circles intentionally at the center of other objects. As you can see, since we got too many objects in the scene which are overlapping each other, so we got some challenges in the selection of these objects. While by using Select Last Created Objects, it allows us to select the last created objects or the circles or the arrayed circles just by a click. But I should hold down Shift and then select the first circle. But I consider this as one of the most practical tools in Rhino, especially when we use array and we want to select the objects. And note that if we modify an object or if we make some changes on it, it will be selected as the last created object. For example, I move the circle. Check this out. It is selected as the last created one. So necessarily we don't have to sketch object from scratch. Even if we edit it or modify it, it is considered as the last created object. Very well. Actually, I'm gonna finish the 3rd session, and as you're concerned, at this session we have taught you too many items and lessons, so please do not skip the main points. Don't forget to practice and take notes. So just be patient in your learning process, and then you will see that you can develop your skills to the next level. Since for sketching the complex objects, these lessons are prerequisite. So watch the videos carefully and don't forget to practice them. Even you can watch this session for many times if it was needed, so you won't have challenges later.